Hello everybody, it is the next day and we are here and we are getting ready to look at our spine that we made. So I'm going to pull all the clips off. Now just from the process of building these up, and I always cut these a little long, you can see maybe that there's a little bit of an edge. And so I'm going to go through and clean those up and just cut them flush so that I don't have an edge there. So grab my, and I'm pretty carpe diem about this. I'm pretty much just going to chop them just like that. If I need to trim more off, I can. That one needs just a little bit more trimmed off. So I'm recording this the next day. I haven't uploaded the other material yet because I, again, am not sure how to make room on my hard drive, but the wheels are turning. And I thought, well, while the wheels are turning, I may as well be making stuff, right? After all, isn't that the name of this channel? Okay. That looks pretty good. And I could round over those with the sandpaper, which I might do. And this chipboard's pretty soft, so these Olfa knives go through it pretty easily. Not like bookboard. Bookboard, you gotta speak very firmly to it. But this you don't have to be quite as forceful with. Alright. So there is our book cover, or our spine rather, I should say. So there's our spine. Let me get rid of all of these clips. So I have my spine, and I have my front cover and my back cover. Now invariably, and you can kind of see how this is like flat and then kind of swoops in, a certain amount of that is going to happen from building this up. You could get these wet and form them a little bit more, but I'm not going to sweat it too much. That's all right. Adds to the character of the book. I don't like that. It's got a little bit of a twist in it. So we can work that twist out. All right, and so that's what our cover is going to look like undone. I've got a bunch of papers over here that I set aside for us to go through for pages. So I'm going to set those aside for right now. I've got them all clipped together, but my plan is that we'll go through those. And I know my camera shut off on me at some point last night. I don't know if you caught this, but I did glue this frame on there, so this will give me a little raised area where I can kind of highlight a picture of some sort in the center there. So just something I like to do. That's kind of what I've been doing recently. All right, and this is Tyvek. This comes from mailers, like envelope mailers that you would mail off things in. So it's this kind of fibrous material. You can buy Tyvek in large rolls at the hardware store, but I find it cheaper to buy these envelopes just at Staples or wherever. You can get them online. So just look up Tyvek mailing envelopes and you'll find these fibrous material. So the purpose behind this is it doesn't tear easily, and this is going to form our hinge. The hinges on these take a lot of wear and tear, and so they need something to kind of bind everything together and take the majority of that that wear and tear. So I use Tyvek. So I was trained to use in college. You could use fabric. I wouldn't use paper for this though, because paper is kind of like metal. You flex it enough and eventually it breaks, right? So I would use something with a little bit more tenacity to it. You can also get something called super that looks like cheesecloth, but it's stiff. You can get that at Hollander's. You can get it online at Amazon, various art supply stores. Utrecht carries it. That could go here as well. That's what traditional bookbinders use. You could use, there's this stiff cambric material. I can't remember what it's called now, but you could use that as well. So there's a variety of different things you could use. You could use plain muslin, but I'm going to use this Tyvek. It's a little short. This is a piece I had left over, but it'll be fine. So I'm just going to kind of, it's about maybe 1/2 inch top and bottom. I'm just going to kind of mark it so I know where to glue it, where to put the glue. And this could be, because this does not flex, and I'm running low on glue. I'm like to here on my glue. So this could be another good use for this tape. I've not actually used this on Tyvek before. I wonder how well it will adhere to the Tyvek. Actually, yes, I have used it on Tyvek before. I've made a couple of albums. I told you those ladies that make those photo albums. I followed a couple of tutorials, and I've made a couple just to kind of learn their ways, because they're essentially books. I found my thing. I told you I couldn't find last night. I found it. I thought it had fallen in the trash. It had not. It magically showed itself to me today. Isn't that funny? I just mentioned it to you yesterday, and then it appears out of nowhere. Anyway, so I was following some of those mini album tutorials, and they use this tape a lot, and they use Tyvek. Some of them do. So I have used this with Tyvek, and it will work. So we will follow suit. And you can see how rigid this is, right? Like, this is really rigid because it's 6 layers. No, sorry, this is 4. This is 8 layers because this is 4 layers of the cardboard tubing. 3 or 4 layers. Usually I do 4. I can't remember what I did here, but it should be 4 layers of the cardboard tubing, and then 4 layers of the cereal box for these spiny things. So it's a lot of layers, so it's very rigid. So these end up being very strong spines. Like, you can feel confident that it's going to hold your book up, and that you can like pick it up off the shelf or whatever by the spine, and it's not gonna fall apart on you. Come on. Always one has to be difficult. Okay. Now I'm going to take my Tyvek, fold it in half, and just kind of find the halfway point-ish. I'm going to turn it this way so I can see it a little better. And again, because I didn't put any wet glue down, this is just kind of wherever it falls, it falls. If it falls crooked, it doesn't matter. You just want to make sure that you have enough on either side to glue down. So a couple inches, 1.5 inches, something like that. All right. So now we are going to, I'm just going to use this to kind of butt these up against each other. So you want this to be pretty straight and pretty evenly spaced. And I want a good 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch. I usually do like a 1/2 inch, so I have plenty of room because these are thick boards. Like this. The boards themselves aren't that thick, but the spinities on the spine are pretty thick. So I want to give myself plenty of room to form grooves. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to take a ballpoint pen and mark it. I'm just going to put some washi tape down on my table so that I can line everything back up as straight as I can. So now I can remove those. And I'm again going to use this tape. Because this won't buckle. You could use wet glue. I don't want you to feel like you have to use tape for any of this. I'm just using it because I have more tape on hand right now than I do wet glue, which is unusual. Usually I have way more wet glue. But so these things work out sometimes. So I'm just doing 3 strips of tape. And I need to mark that this was the top. I'm just going to trim off any little bits of tape that are overhanging. Because this stuff is really sticky, and if you got little pieces of it overhanging, it can stick to things where you don't want it to stick and give you all kinds of trouble. So I'm just going to give that a little trim, just to kind of neaten up those edges. All right. And I'm thinking I might put down some glue again just to allow myself time to adjust, because it's going to be very time sensitive. And I don't want to get this a little crooked and feel like I'm stuck with it. So I'm going to put down little beads of glue, so I have a little working time. Put this back in line. Okay. Now I want the front. And the back. Okay, gently flip this over and then burnish things down. Okay, and there, friends, is the base for my book cover. And it's usually at this part that I make sure that it sits more or less straight. that the edges line up, but it's looking pretty good. My corners are lining up pretty good. It sits up pretty evenly, so it's looking good. All right, so the next step with this is going to be covering this with fabric. And you can cover it with fabric and then just leave that fabric and let that be the decorative thing. You can cover it with book paper. Now I did make this decorative edge here, so it's going to work better with fabric than paper, and not book cloth, but just regular fabric, because it needs to be able to work its way around these shapes. So the last several books I've made, I've actually painted the covers, which I really like the way that looks. You know, if you didn't do all this, if you didn't do this frame and you didn't do these spines, you could use a more traditional book cloth or something. But that, because it's a little more rigid, or some book paper. I do have some beautiful paper from Hollanders. I'll put a link down to Hollanders. I'll try to remember to do that. It's all online now. It used to be a brick and mortar store with some online things. Now it's all online, but they have beautiful papers, handmade papers, bookbinding supplies, all kinds of cool stuff. So I'll try to remember to put a link down to them. But you can also Google it. It's Hollanders in Ann Arbor. So I think I'm gonna let this dry, and we will glue down the fabric. We'll paint and then glue down the fabric another day.